Everybody, this is the second video of the fifth session. I just wanted to say that in the previous video, we spoke about one group out of three main groups within the Jewish underground that sought to advance the plan to blow up the Dome of the Rock, yes, and the Temple Mount, an initiative that carried both religious and political aims. And I want to say something more general about the Temple Mount. And many times I do not hear people speak about the religious context. I think it's important to notice, to mention that for many generations, till today, including today, Jews have longed for the rebuilding of the temple of Beit HaMikdash. Right? This is not just something that comes out of nowhere or something that has to be linked with radicalism. I mean, there's this longing for the rebuilding of the temple. This appears extensively in the Talmud and in Maimonides' Laws of Kings. Anyone who reads the laws, Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamoteihem, can read about the rebuilding of the temple. It's a commandment. It's something that Jews should be prepared to do, think about, plan, and obviously in the prayer book, in the Siddur, that Jews recite every single day. ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים. ובירושלים עירך ברחמים תשוב, ותשכון בתוכה כאשר דיברת. Now, one cannot speak about the temple in isolation from the tradition itself and from the central place it holds in Jewish faith. So, of course, one may wait for the temple to descend miraculously from heaven, right? באופן ניסי, באש מן השמיים, or one may try to promote its realization actively. Such promotion can take different forms, through prayer, through good deeds, through persuading the broader Jewish public that it is right to ascend the Temple Mount, or through an attempt to build the temple itself, either alongside the mosque or in its place. It can also involve efforts to influence the existing government and so on. So in other words, the very hope for the temple, just like the hope for the Messiah, Mashiach. People talk about messianism. Okay. So the hope for a temple, the hope for Messiah, is a deep and complex hope that can be carried in the heart of an anti-Zionist religious Jew, a religious Zionist Jew, at times even a non-religious Jew. The question, of course, is what the practical and political implications of this longing are. Okay, now I want to go on, as promised, and speak about the reaction of Rabbi Menachem Froman. You see here this drawing has been done by his wife, Hadassah Froman. You might see it, Rishum Hadassah Froman. And this was attached to the story that he published in Nekuda Journal, and I'm going to touch upon it now. So in June 1986, while members of the Jewish underground were still imprisoned in Tel Mond, Froman published in Nekuda a short story that provoked scandal within the Gush Emunim circles, titled Hayta Ke'almana. Hayta Ke'almana, she was like a widow. Who was like a widow? That's the question. Who was like the widow? We're gonna discover right now. So the story, and if any of you want to ever write a paper on reactions within religious Zionism to the underground, the Jewish underground, you want me as a co-author, we can definitely, and in general, I always invite students and colleagues, and I really believe in collaborations because I believe, everybody has an expertise, a different expertise, and people come from different disciplines, sociology, anthropology, history, um, philosophy, religion, and by joining forces, I think very interesting papers, books can appear. So I'm a big believer in this. So this is a general comment. If any of you feel like I'm touching, I'm speaking here about something that you already are writing about, you want to write about, and you think it would be fruitful to write together, and it's something that I have, the desire myself, the passion. I need to have the passion for it, so we can definitely discuss this. So this is a very, very interesting um, story that nobody has written about yet. I did mention this in my PhD dissertation, um, but it's worth, really a literature analyzing. But I'm gonna just tell you in short what the story is about. We're not gonna read the story together. The story portrays the wife of a prisoner. Who is the prisoner? A prisoner. A prisoner. We know it's a prisoner from the Jewish underground. And the literary double of a member of the Jewish underground who is torn. So this wife, this woman, and you can see her in the painting, there are two eyes. One eye is the wife, one eye is the husband, the prisoner, right? Someone who's involved in Jewish terrorism, and his wife. And the wife is torn between her loyalty to her husband and the pain of his imprisonment. So there's the imprisonment, and there's the loyalty, and she recalls how her husband, in the name of collectivist idealism, has been willing to sacrifice his private life, meaning his family life, his children, his wife, his daily workplace. In his words, the great hand gathers all manifestations of faith performed across the breadth of the nation, like seeds collected in a basket. So this is what the wife is recalling that her husband used to say. And from them it sows our it sows our future, right? So there's sowing the future, collecting in a basket. All of these manifestations of faith performed, all of these manifestations. And okay, end of quote. So faithful to this idealism, her husband had previously supported the expulsion of a family deemed unsuited to the character of their settlement. So she remembers this also had an impact on his approach to this just family that was just different than other families in the settlement. But again, he does not look at the specific individual, but rather always ask what is the ideal, the collective. And he justified this, right? This expulsion of this family with the claim that, and this is a quote, the life of the collective outweighs the life of the individual. End of quote. So the prisoner's wife hears on the radio, the story goes on, and she has these thoughts, she's contemplating, and all of a sudden she turns on the radio and she hears a neighbor, her neighbor, their neighbor, the literary figure representing Rabbi Menachem Froman himself. Okay, so his name is not mentioned, but we know this is Rabbi Menachem Froman. And what is the neighbor doing? He's condemning the underground. And this arouses in her anger towards him, towards Rav Menachem Froman, towards the neighbor. And Rav Menachem Froman is writing from his own experience because he had neighbors who supported the underground, the Jewish underground. He was in a right-wing environment, sometimes extreme right-wing, in the Gush Emunim environment, that even if they did not support, many times they chose to remain silent and not to condemn. So she's angry towards him and towards others like him who, and this is a quote, with lofty verses on their lips and a double-edged sword in their hand, seek to take vengeance upon good Jews and to rebuke those who fought our wars against the nations, binding their comrades in chains and shacking their neighbors with iron bonds, rendering judgment upon them, a glory to all their pious followers. So some of you might recognize this is in the story. So Froman performs a striking transposition. There's a transposition here. Originally, this is based on verses from Psalms, right? לאסור מלאכיהם וזיקים ונכבדיהם בחבלי ברזל לעשות בהם משפט כתוב הדר הוא לכל חסידיו הללויה. And here, in the original verses, right, there's the biblical verses that describe divine vengeance against the nations that were persecuting the Jews, right? לעשות נקמה בגויים תוכחות בלאומים. But this is right and carried out by Hasidim. The Hasidim are the ones that are carrying out. And here it inserts them into a contemporary, inverted context. Those who appear to be the Hasidim, such as Froman, adorned with rabbinic authority, are now taking vengeance upon the nations, but upon the Jewish underground prisoners, who are portrayed as the good Jews. The true Hasidim are the underground members, for they fought our wars against the nation. So now, okay, in the story, or in this wife's, the vision of the wife, she feels like the real Hasidim are not taking vengeance. They're the one that these rabbis like Rav Menachem Froman, instead of being true Hasidim, instead of pointing their rage against the nations, who are they condemning? Who are they chasing? Who are they persecuting, right? Who are they after? After the underground members, the real Hasidim, the real pious, the real righteous people. So Froman is cast as a counterfeit Hasid, masquerading in order to strike at the authentic ones. And that night, the story continues in a dream. So the wife falls asleep. So we have her, she misses her husband, but she also adores him, and she remembers how important it is in order to bring upon the redemption, to do these ideal deeds. And then she hears the rabbi, this annoying rabbi, this Rav Froman, condemning her husband, and she's so aggravated. And then she falls asleep. And at night, while sleeping in a dream, a woman dressed in black with disheveled hair, comes to the prisoner's door, strikes it with her hand, and shouts at him, at the prisoner. All of this, the wife is envisioning in her dream. Basically, she's this 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 woman, right, dressed in black, and she sees how she's shouting at the prisoner, at her husband, accusing him of having harmed her. This woman, who is this woman that is accusing the husband of harming her? The prisoner defends himself, right? So this husband is defending himself, claiming that he had tried to help her. He says, I came to help you. As the dream unfolds, it becomes clear that the woman represents Zion. The woman is Zion, or the Shekhinah, the feminine divine presence. Zion. So Zion is embodied here. She comes in a form of a woman with black, a mourning woman. She was like a widow. Who was like a widow? The prisoner's wife? Zion was like a widow? Zion is accusing the husband and saying, you're hurting me. You think you're helping me. You think. But in fact, the opposite has happened. You harmed me. And she's furious. And she's angry. And then the wife wakes up of the dream. And when she awakens from the dream, her husband calls from prison to share that he too had dreamed. And what was the dream of the husband while he's in prison? In his dream, his wife, okay, I hope you're following. His wife appeared dressed in black, her hair disheveled. Sorry, I wasn't pronouncing it correctly. Disheveled, right? Crying out, why did you do this to me? The prisoner weeps an apology on the phone, saying, I did not understand how my ideology cut off the flow of your life. So he's apologizing to his wife because his wife appeared to him in the dream. At the story's conclusion, now what does the prisoner's wife tell him on the phone? In the story's conclusion, okay, the prisoner's wife whispers into the phone. She says, I am Zion. Ani hi Tzion. A literary union is forged between the feminine Zion, the Shekhinah, Tzion, revealed in the dream, and the prisoner's wife, and between the wife herself and Zion as she appears in her husband's dream. The narrative reveals that the prisoner harmed not only his wife, his neighbors, his surroundings, but Zion itself. Here you can see, this is an unpublished photo of Rabbi Menachem Froman from 1980. This means that during the Jewish underground, when they were exposed, 1984, this is pretty much how he looked like. If you search on Google Rav Menachem Froman, you'll see the white Rav Menachem Froman, who met with Yasser Arafat, with the Hamas leaders. This is Rav Menachem Froman, who just moved to the settlement of Tekoa, and three of his children here. I think this is Yossi. Today he's the head of Yeshiva Machanaim in Efrat, of Yossi Froman. Shuvaya Froman, and Shivi Froman. So you see him here studying Torah. I do not recognize which book is this. Maybe some of you can recognize. So I received this photo from the photographer, a friend of Rabbi Menachem Froman, Eli Birnbaum from Tekoa. I don't know him personally, but he was kind enough to share this with me. And I hope this photo will be printed in my book on Rav Froman, because I think it's very powerful. But anyhow, I wanted to share this photo with you. So let's speak about the responses to the story. One of the underground prisoners, Yehuda Etzion, we spoke about, felt that the story had been written about him and about his wife, Hayta ke'almana. She was like a widow. And he was very, very insulted. I'm trying to to take care of the aircon. Okay, I think I did something right. Good. Beseder. So, and he felt that the story has been written about him and his wife, and he sent an angry letter to Froman. Froman, in turn, replied with a detailed letter. By the way, if any of you want, it was never published. If you ever want, I can send you the letter. It's a handwritten letter. Froman, in turn, replied with a detailed letter in which he argued that he had not intended to write about the Etzion family. Now, I agree with Yehuda Etzion. I do think that the story was written about Yehuda Etzion. And maybe we can also agree with Rav Froman that it's not only about Yehuda Etzion, right? He wanted to convey a message, right? And he was sort of apologizing. And he said, I've not even meant to write about the Jewish underground. I just, I wanted to write this general story to deliver this message. And he stressed that he was fiercely opposed to its actions, right? Of course, he's not denying that he's fiercely opposed to the actions of the Jewish underground, but he says the story has nothing to do with the Jewish underground. According to him, the story had been an opportunity to illustrate the tension between rigid ideology and between vitality, life. At the end of the letter, Froman recounted that when he learned Yehuda Etzion's wife has been offended, so this shows us that until Yehuda Etzion wrote the letter, probably people in Gush Emunim were discussing this or speaking about this. Did you hear that? I forgot the name of Etzion's wife. Maybe I'll remember soon. So, if you heard, she's offended. And Rav Froman tells Yehuda Etzion in the letter that when he understood that she was offended, he turned to Moshe Shapira, Rav Moshe Shapira, from Ofra, very well known, the father of Rav Yoshua Shapira, Rav Yitzchak Shapira. And Rav Moshe Shapira, right, so he sought reconciliation. And Shapira, however, dismissed the request, remarking, only someone unaccustomed to literature could understand your story in such a way. So Rav Moshe Shapira reassured, he said, don't worry about it. Following Etzion's letter, Froman described his own feelings. And I'm quoting, as a result of the reaction to my story, I felt a great sense of loneliness. My language is foreign to much of the public among whom I have chosen to live. So it feels like he's writing literature. Also, Rav Froman didn't really come from a religious home. It's a bit complex. His parents were people of faith. They believed in God. They used to pray, but they didn't keep Shabbat. I think this is something more common in in what we call, just diaspora Jewry. And, Jews, even such as myself, I can go to shul, I can go and pray in synagogue, but I don't observe halakha, um, um, strictly or sometimes at all. And people, I think in Israel this is a bit less common. There's more of this, division between the Dati and the Chiloni, and you're Dati or you're Chiloni. There is a large amount of Masorati, but many times they come from the Sephardi Jews. Well, I think there are also shifts, and there are things that are changing in these, also in this. But Rav Menachem Froman is saying, I feel lonely because I chose to live amongst Merkaz Arav people, Gush Emunim people. I became a rabbi. You are my friends, and you don't really get it. You don't understand. Why are you offended? This is literature. This is, don't take it personally. Okay, so one of the rebuking letters Froman received after publishing She Was Like a Widow came from another rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Tzuriel, a graduate of Merkaz Arav, and at the time a spiritual supervisor at Yeshivat Sha'alavim. And in his letter, also, I have it in my possession, he testified that he appreciated Froman. He says, "Erachti otcha," appreciated you, which was precisely why he felt compelled to trouble himself with a critical and admonishing note. Tzuriel reproached Froman for causing pain to Jews, says. You caused pain to Jews, and for adding tension between husband and wife. That is, between the underground prisoners and their spouses. He demanded that Froman go personally to Tel Mond, that's where the prisoners were at, to struggle in the dust of the prisoners' feet. And certainly also of their wives, so not only the prisoners, but also the wives' feet, and to ask their genuine forgiveness. So you have to ask for forgiveness. You've been so wrong. You're causing tension between husband and wife, and you're speaking against these good Jews. You're causing them pain. It's very, very upset. And these are only two examples of these responses to the story that was published in Nekuda. Now, I want to turn to a figure who had a profound influence on Yehuda Etzion, and whose writings and personality strengthened him in the direction of planning the bombing of the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. I'm not claiming, and this is Shabtai Ben Dov, I'm not claiming that Shabtai Ben Dov would necessarily have agreed with such a plan, but I am convinced that Etzion believed he would have. Shabtai Ben Dov was born in May 1924 in Vilna, Lithuania. By the way, my mother's family comes from Lithuania. From my father, I come from Hasidic family. From my mother, I come from a Misnagdic family. So I have both. This is a secret. You're the first to know. And Shabtai Ben Dov, so he was born in Lithuania, and he came to the land of Israel, then mandatory Palestine, Palestina, the British Empire, 1935. He joined the Irgun, the Etzel, Etzel, Irgun Tzva'i Lochem, and later followed Avraham Stern. right? Also known as Yair, Avraham Stern, and founding the Lehi, the Stern Group. He was imprisoned in Acre, Latrun, and many other places, and during the War of Independence, Milchemet HaAtzmaut, he fought in battles in the Negev, probably not far from where I live today. Not far from my house in Lehavim. Ben Dov engaged deeply with Jewish law, particularly the tractates, the Masechtot of Nezikin in the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. In the 1950s, he began working in the Ministry of Justice, in the legislative department, and later served as a legal advisor in other government ministries. His books were published in the 1950s. The best known, well, not all of his writings, but his main books were published then. The best known of which is Israel's Redemption in the State Crisis, Geulat Israel b'mashber hamedina. That's the most famous one. Only in 2007, not long ago, Yehuda Etzion published the complete writings of Shabtai Ben Dov through the Sulamot press. It's his press. It's called Tza'at Sulamot because of the Sulam. Sulam HaGeula. Sulam is a ladder. Yeah. Ben Dov died in December 1978, meaning before the Jewish underground was exposed. But already then, they have been operating, planning, thinking of the Temple Mount. Already then, 1978. Remember, the first terrorist attack was 1980, I think, right? You probably remember better than I do. But before the terror attack came the Temple Mount planning. Yehuda Etzion was first exposed to Ben Dov's writings at a young age, but it was only with the founding of Ofra, sorry, the settlement of Ofra, 1975, that their connection deepened. And Etzion became one of his close disciples, some would say his only devoted disciple. He invited Ben Dov to deliver lectures to the members of the Young Settlement in 1978, the year Ben Dov's final year. Their relationship intensified that year, and Etzion would often visit him in the hospital, consult with him. After Ben Dov's death, Etzion received his manuscripts from Ben Dov's wife, Yael. Etzion said they were very well organized, and ever since, for almost 30 years, nearly 30 years, he was editing and publishing them. You know this, and this project took, as I said, nearly 30 years, and you can see here the books. I think I would go. I want to actually call the Etzion family and ask to come and purchase these books from their, I don't know if Yehuda will be home, his wife will be home, but I will let you know how this goes. I will present myself as an academic that is interested in Shabtai Ben Dov, and that is true. And I will ask to go and buy the books. So maybe who knows, maybe I'll be traveling to Ofra in the coming weeks to buy these books. Hope they're not too pricey. Do any of you have the books? Did you ever hear of Shabtai Ben Dov? I'm interested to hear. Please share with me. So Shabtai Ben Dov wrote extensively and often addressed the question of the Temple Mount. I have chosen, so I went through, I didn't obviously read all of his writings. This is not not something, this is a project, to go through everything. Um, it's something I would love doing one day, but I did read a lot of the texts that have to do with Temple Mount. And I chosen one essay, which I uploaded to today's class link, titled, so it's in Hebrew, okay? The legal status of the Temple Mount from the present time to the time to come, right? Most of the times we think of from the future to the present. So his title is From the Present to the Future. I mean, from the past to the present, right? That's what we're used to. And now it's from the present to the future, to the time to come. The essay was written in response to statements made by rabbis at a special conference held at Mosad Rav Kook, late 1967, after the Six-Day War, about 3 months after the Six-Day War. And several lectures addressed the theme of the sanctity of Jerusalem and the temple, and some speakers presented the position that entering the Temple Mount in our times is forbidden. Right? And if you want, I think this is worth a course. What do you say? Speaking about Temple Mount. So interesting, so much to say about this. In religious Zionism, we have Haredi, religious Zionism. What are the different approaches, perspectives? And there are many surprises once you really get into this. When one explores this topic, there's so much to discover, and it's many times the opposite of what you would think that certain rabbis would have recommended. So some speakers, as I said, they were speaking about entering the Temple Mount, ascending the Temple Mount, Aliyah Har HaBayit, as something forbidden. One rabbi, for example, argued that since it is impossible to know the exact location of the temple, one of the problems is halachic. Where exactly was the Holy of Holies? Where exactly on the Temple Mount, right? There's a mountain. Har HaBayit. The Har, at the Bayit is Beit HaMikdash, right? Har HaBayit is the mountain where Beit HaMikdash was. But where exactly on the mountain was Beit HaMikdash, and where exactly was the Holy of Holies? Because not some places in Beit HaMikdash, let's say Beit HaMikdash was built. Not everyone can enter any point on Beit HaMikdash, in Beit HaMikdash. So it's a question, right? So one rabbi says, we do not know today the exact location of the temple, and therefore it's forbidden to enter the Temple Mount at all. Since in the present, all are presumed to be ritually impure, we're all considered impure. Jews are waiting only after the Mashiach comes, then there's a way to deal with this impurity. So, so it's forbidden for such impurity to enter the temple area. Now, Ben Dov responds. This is very interesting. Let's listen carefully to what he has to say. He writes this. The law is that one may not ascend the Temple Mount except under specific conditions, times, and boundaries. So he does acknowledge that you need conditions, times, boundaries, תנאים, זמנים, גבולות, okay? But conversely, the other side of the coin is that under the proper conditions, times, and boundaries, ascent is not merely permitted, it is even a commandment. So he says, okay, you need specific condition, times, and boundaries, and if these are not fulfilled, then it's prohibited to enter. But if there's a way to figure this out, this becomes a commandment, it becomes a mitzvah. It's not something neutral that you can choose to do or not to do. The division is that under conditions of destruction and subjugation the prohibition remains primary. So what's primary? During the galut, during when time Jews are in exile, so they need to hold on to the prohibition, but under conditions of redemption, the the commandment is, of course, the primary obligation. So what era are we living now in? In an era of redemption, and we should seek the mitzvah, the commandment, to see how we fulfill the commandment, or we're in exile, meaning Temple Mount is not in Jewish hands. Jews are scattered all around the world. They do not have a kingdom. They do not have sovereignty in the land of Israel. And then they should stick to the prohibition, and it's enough to pray for Beit HaMikdash. So he opposes the rabbis of the conference who claim that rebuilding the temple is now a matter of a miracle, for a miracle. He says, you rabbis are waiting for the temple just to be rebuilt in a miracle. And that one cannot know which parts of the mount are sacred without prophetic revelation. He says, that's what you rabbis are saying. And he rebukes them. They're saying the situation cannot be changed, right? So they're saying we need to sit and wait, to be passive, that there is no point in trying to change it, which is exactly what was argued by those who opposed leaving the diaspora, those who oppose Zionism. He says, you're Zionist rabbis and this is how you're speaking? Remember the rabbis, the anti-Zionist rabbis, they were the majority of rabbis, by the way. He says, in his words, in practice, we have no fixed laws belonging to this time, Hazman Hazeh, as opposed to the days of the Messiah. He says, I do not I do not see this division, this differentiation. What belongs to this time, but not to the Messianic era, is not meant to endure, but must be changed. Even the prohibition of ascending the Temple Mount in the absence of suitable conditions cannot be considered, even for a moment, is the essence of the law, but must be absorbed into the striving to create the proper conditions so that the prohibition will turn into an actual commandment. So he's saying in a conference, instead of saying it is what it is, you need to seek to transform the prohibition to a commandment and say, it's not the time, there aren't the conditions, let's bring the time. Let's make it the time. Let's make sure the conditions are right. Let's work on it. Let's take it as our mission, our task. The only messianic miracle we need, he says, is the miracle of such a leadership arising. Yeah, the miracle is if you rabbis are going to listen to what I'm saying. Then he says, whoever comes and demonstrates according to the Mishnah with a measuring rod in his hand, in sargel medida, that a given place is the site of the altar, will be recognized as the true prophet for whom we have awaited to reveal the location. End of quote. So he's saying the prophet, this does not happen as part of a miracle. This happens with hard work. Open the Mishnah, open the Talmud, go to the mountain, take your measurement tools and try to figure it out and come back with answers. He says, this is the time. Now is the time to do this. Okay, so you can notice how pragmatic Shabtai Ben Dov is. He insists that the Messianic era is now. We're not supposed to wait for some revelation or miracle. The miracle is precisely what we do. And by the way, that is what the first Zionist says. נס לא קרה לנו. פח שמן לא מצאנו. You know, the Zionist song for Hanukkah is, the real Hanukkah is the Zionist project. No miracle happened to us. We didn't find the oil jar. We didn't find Pach HaShemen. We went, we ascended the mountain, we built a country, we fought the wars, and this is the miracle. This is it. The miracle is us. So Shabtai Ben Dov wants to continue this narrative and this way of thinking. He calls for action, for involvement, for ascent to the Temple Mount. In another text, he states that it is important to plan the construction of the temple. He says, plan. You don't want to build it. You cannot build it now for different reasons. Okay, but why not plan? Why not make this real? Indeed, drawing on Maimonides, right? He acknowledges that the actual time for building has not yet arrived. Okay, he agrees. But this does not mean that planning is unnecessary. Everything must be prepared so that when the right moment comes, construction can begin immediately. He describes the temple as the center of the nation's life. Its very heart, by the way, Yehuda Etzion himself has writing about this. I need to find it. I have it scanned somewhere. There's a booklet. I don't think you can find it online. If you remind me, I'll look. It's somewhere in my photos or in my documents that I scanned. Once I was at a friend's house and I found this booklet of Yehuda Etzion on Har HaBayit, Beit HaMikdash. And Beit HaMikdash, and he writes about the Mikdash as the heart. Not only he, of course, there are Jewish sources that speak about it, but it's interesting to see what he does and how he interprets these sources as a very realistic and pragmatic and something that, right, the political drive that he extracts from these sources. So Ben Dov even delves into discussions of geographical location, topographical considerations, architectural questions, and style. And I want to conclude Ben Dov as a continuing influence today. So Shabtai Ben Dov continues to exert influence, though on a limited circle. I do not claim that he's a very influential figure, not at all, but he's also not someone that is unimportant. One of those influence is Moti Karpel, that you can see here. Moti Karpel, a journalist and right-wing activist, and Karpel wrote, I'm quoting, in the 1950s, while all the good Zionists stood in a line and saying, Anu Banu Arza, yeah, we came to the land, and it was good that they did. He says it's good that they did, but while they were marching and singing this song, right, Anu Banu Arza, Lifnot, Libanot, what did Shabtai Ben Dov do? Shabtai Ben Dov understood that the entire enterprise was built on shifting sands. The first part of his book, Israel's Redemption in the State Crisis, is a remarkable analysis of the ideological and moral foundation of Zionism, as well as of the social, political, economic, institutional, diplomatic, and geopolitical situation of the young state. From this analysis, Ben Dov arrived, and this is still a quote of Moti Karpel. From this analysis, Ben Dov arrived at a conclusion that was completely outsider-like at the time. That the establishment of the state, not in principle, but in the particular way it was established, was not the realization of redemption, but a severe crisis in its unfolding, and that the Zionist ethos was destined to collapse in a profound crisis. His ability to think against the total current of those days did not stem only from his exceptional intellectual gifts, but above all from the fact that he was one of the Lechi, veterans, silenced and marginalized from the Yishuv. an outsider in the full sense of the word. This enabled him to look at reality from an external, critical, and independent perspective. And by the way, people like Yehuda Etzion and Mordy Miller also saw themselves as people who are, they're outsiders. They're outsiders. They're not Merkaz Harav, not Gush Emunim, mainstream, okay? And this allowed him at the same time with identification with the overall course of the return to Zion and responsibility towards it. So he had both identifying with the return to Zion, but also responsibility towards it. And now, last paragraph in the name of Karpel, what Shabtai Ben Dov foresaw in the 1950s lies before us today in all its harshness. Zionism has reached a dead end. It apparently required the disengagement from Gush Katif, Hitnatkut, we will get to this, and even the Second Lebanon War. In order for significant circles within the Israeli society to open themselves to Ben Dov's insights. And so today, as we stand in the midst of the state's crisis, we're able to understand its source and its foundations, and more importantly, what the way out of it might be, end of quote, in light of Shabtai Ben Dov. Now we move on to the week's discussion question. Do you think the Jewish underground represents the spirit of Gush Emunim, or was it a deviation from it? I assume that your answers will, at least in part, be complex. Yes, but no, but perhaps even yes and no. I would be glad if you could explain in what way yes and in what way no. Looking forward to seeing you in our next session in just a few days. Chag Sameach, Shana Tova, Lehitraot. Lekulam. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.